right, so welcome to this episode of the Peeples Exchange. I'm Regis Peeples with Peeples and Co. And I have my guest here who will introduce himself.
I am W. Youssef Doucet. At work, people know me as Will. At home, people call me Youssef.
Perfect. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about pedagogy, storytelling, and the way those things intersect, why they're important in the community, and, how storytelling is used as a tool to promote change, bring people together, and enrich the environment overall, both inside and outside the classroom, which is why Will is the perfect person to talk to about this. So first off, Will, I mean, who are you? What do you do? What's going on? Can you talk to me about yourself and what you do?
That's who am I, right? That takes a lifetime to answer, doesn't it? Right?
Yeah, for sure.
But I'm a native Angelino, born and raised in Los Angeles, with family from the South. My mother's family is from Texarkana,
Okay.
the Arkansas side with family on the Texas side of Texarkana. My father's family is from New Orleans, Louisiana.
Okay.
They all moved out here. Both sets of families moved out here mid 40s,
Mhm.
World War II, for jobs,
Mhm.
better opportunities. So I was born and raised in LA.
And also, I feel really bad because I didn't introduce you properly. I always call
Oh,
you Doctor, but I forgot to
yeah,
introduce
that's all
that as
right.
I know, but look, you a doctor and you teach, so can
Yeah,
you tell us a little bit about your dissertation before I kind of get
I
into
will.
some of your organizations and stuff?
I sure will. So yeah, that's right. I am a PhD. I'm still not used to being called doctor.
Yeah.
The And it's in cultural studies. And I selected cultural studies as an area in some ways for convenience.
Mm-hmm.
It was informed by convenience. It was also informed by the experiences of a friend of mine and what wasn't offered locally.
Mm.
Because I considered, I knew that I always wanted to finish with a PhD,
Yeah.
right?
Just in general.
Just in general, right? And I took that path. So as I said, I started at St. Mary's, and the degree would have been in liberal arts, a degree in liberal arts.
Mm-hmm.
Then I transferred to San Francisco State with for a degree in Black Studies with the humanities track, right?
Mm-hmm.
Humanities emphasis. Um, Wide intellectual interest, wide academic interest. Wasn't sure which direction to go
Mm-hmm.
for grad school. I got a letter from San Francisco State saying, "Oh, whoops, our bad. There's this one English class that you still have to complete." I'm like, "Okay, no big
That's
deal.
interesting.
I'll just go down to the community college." And
Yeah.
there's more going on. You know, I was living in the Bay Area now.
Mm-hmm.
Had married with children now, and my family decided after visiting my mother for summers that they wanted to move to Southern California. So we had
Mm-hmm.
just moved to Southern California, and I'm in between jobs and all this.
Mm-hmm.
So which also meant I had time to take this class in the
Yeah.
fall.
Yeah.
So I was like, "Okay, no big deal. I'll just go right down the street," because it turned out that the San Bernardino Valley College was right down the street from us. We were in
Mm-hmm.
Colton. So I took the class. This basically what is equivalent to our used to be English 2, now C1001.
Mm-hmm.
That that class after that I hadn't taken. I was like, oh, okay. So I took the class, and the instructor was like, "Yeah, what are you going to do after this class?" I said, "Well, I got this interest, I got that interest." He said, "You should go to Cal State San Bernardino. They have a English composition program. You'd be perfect for it." Once I got into the classes, and we're looking at a lot of this critical theory, what is cultural studies, all this, and
Mm-hmm.
got into a class with the person who ended up being my committee chair, Eve Oishi, Dr. Eve Oishi,
Mm-hmm.
a class called Transnational Media.
Mm.
There might have been a subtitle, but the main title was
Yeah.
Transnational Media. So we were looking at film, some international film,
Mm-hmm.
uh, readings on international television, film. That's where I got introduced to the concept of third cinema
Mm-hmm.
and imperfect cinema. So I was digging it, and it really kind of illuminated for me. Oh, this is what you can do with cultural studies. It is
Mm-hmm.
wide open, and indeed, I learned in it within the program that cultural studies is in a sense not just interdisciplinary,
Mm-hmm.
but almost adisciplinary, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe even anti-disciplinary, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just really kind of committed to that blurring of distinctions between the various disciplines.
Mm-hmm.
So I found a space where I thought, yeah, this works.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that's a perfect way to transition. I have a couple bulleted questions here. So just, give me your answer, your
Okay.
truth, and what you really think that the community needs to hear for themselves. So, uh, you know, you can give us the deep stuff for the educators, but also, give us something for the everyday folks who might be watching and listening, and maybe they don't necessarily have the same accessibility, or background to sort of
Mm-hmm.
do certain things or
Mm-hmm.
to decompress and comprehend certain things in a way that might be useful. I think about it like I had a student and she was like, "Hey, I'm all about sustainability." And she started talking to the class and using all these huge words and all this crazy language, and everyone was just lost at the end. They were like, "I
Mm-hmm.
really loved your passion," but they were like, "We don't know what can we do, as the everyday person when we go home
Mm-hmm.
today."
Mm-hmm.
So I guess what I'm saying is give us a little bit something for people on the educational spectrum here who maybe have their doctorates, but also
Mm-hmm.
give us something for the people who maybe want to get one.
Mm-hmm.
And thanks for sharing your story because I think that's also inspirational, especially as it relates to finding your home, not feeling like you have to stay somewhere that doesn't
Mm-hmm.
work or fit for you, especially when you started your journey. There are transfer processes set up for a reason.
Yep.
And so we just gonna get into the gritty here. So why is community so important to you? And what role do you think storytelling plays
Mm.
in that connection that you have?
So, well, community is important to me specifically because it is my most immediate experience. The first community is family, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm from a large family, so I'm used to living in. I grew up in community, and I
Mm-hmm.
do. I'm from a large family, extended family, so that when I was growing up, family never meant
Mm-hmm.
you know parents and siblings. Family
Yeah.
always meant your extended family, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even that term extended family wasn't even necessary because that just
Yeah.
it just was all
They your
encompassed.
family anyway.
Your
So
family, right? So just kind of that direct experience of really growing up in a community, kind of like growing up in a village. And then the friends of the family that they were really just kind of an extension,
mm-hmm.
right? We knew our neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, my grandmother moved a couple of doors down from us, and then people in the neighborhood that we went to school with, right, who were also going to Transfiguration Catholic
Mm-hmm.
School, or were going to the local public schools, but we were all walking home together, and right.
So do
So,
you feel like as far as educators in the classroom, it sounds like the thing you're saying is that maybe they need to foster a sense of community or make people feel like extended family, but basically treating people like
but
family.
treating people like family, though, yes, like being told, right, or you're
Oh, I
not
see.
alone in this world, right? You got
Mm-hmm.
family here. You got there are people you can rely on.
So they never really feel isolated or maybe like they don't have anywhere to go.
Exactly.
And I could see how that could be great for a student because, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
students, whether they're maybe an older student or an
Mm-hmm.
international student from a place where there's maybe low population and they're the only one from where they're from, or
Right.
they're the only one in the classroom who speaks their indigenous language and things like that. I could see how what you're saying might help someone kind of feel connected, but also reach out and, people could learn things about them.
And
It sounds like you're
that
learning a
reaching
lot.
out is part two, right?
Yeah.
Maybe a generational thing, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
again, there were the parents on the block who
Mm-hmm.
would also um, interact with other folks' kids.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, are you looking both ways before you cross the street? So
Mm-hmm.
those types of things, right? And um, you know neighbors knowing each other. Now I
Mm-hmm.
know a lot of that changed because of the crack epidemic, no doubt about
I
it,
mean,
right?
yeah, that was a whole nother beast.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and I definitely saw the difference. People were outside more often.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot more street activity, right, and
Mm-hmm.
people walking, and people began to feel less safe,
Yeah.
and for proper reason, but also, and a different kind of story is being told, and a different kind of
Mm-hmm.
story was being written, right,
Yeah. On both ends in
on
that
both
case.
ends, exactly.
And that kind of leads me to my next question. So, how do you think storytelling impacts learning? Because when you talk about maybe people having fear or navigating spaces differently from the stories they're hearing, I'm assuming, they're taking in that story and it's processing as
Mm-hmm.
knowledge in a sense, and they're going out in the world. So,
Mm-hmm.
how do you think storytelling impacts
I think
learning?
it's everything. We are human beings are storytellers, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you get home and tell the story of your day, right? How was your day, dear?
That's right.
But really, I think it's everything, and I certainly know it. I use it. I employ stories, um, my own personal experiences,
Mm-hmm.
or experiences I'm aware of, or
Mm-hmm.
um, references to film narrative, or literary narrative,
Mm-hmm.
um, to illustrate points. The story, right, is this is how these things play out in our everyday life, or
Mm-hmm.
in lived existence, right? Our living reality.
Mm-hmm.
This is how it's real. It isn't just conceptual, right? But we live these concepts. So I think being able to tell a story is really it's critical to my pedagogy. I try as best I can in the classes to generate discussion, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Explanation, and the use of narrative, right, to illustrate. Get the students talking not just to me but to each other as much as possible. Get them as much as possible to tell their stories.
So it sounds like, you kind of gave me my next question was going to be about your pedagogy, which you've been kind of doing on your own. So I didn't even bother with the question because you already given it to us. But so it sounds like you foster community in your classroom by telling stories, sharing stories, whether it's your experience or not, or other stories you've collected, as a way to get students to not only learn concepts that maybe can be broken down through storytelling, but also to encourage them to share their own stories. So then you end up with this gumbo pot of
Yeah.
stories, basically.
Yes.
And when I think about that, and
I
you
certainly
you
try anyway.
you know a little bit about storytelling and myself, but I'm really wondering, what do you think are the most important aspects for someone intending to teach?
Hmm.
You mentioned mythos and true stories, untrue stories, things like that. So for educators, what are the most important aspects of telling a story while teaching, whether
Okay.
it's students
All
or
right.
at work
Yeah.
or wherever we're at?
Well, certainly when teaching, right? One
Mm-hmm.
of the that it's appropriate, right? And what I mean by appropriate is, it's specific to whatever concept
It's
we're
the right story
discussing,
for the
right?
moment.
It's the right story
Yes.
for the moment, exactly. It's going to be illustrative, or in illuminating in some kind of way, or
Mm-hmm.
challenging in a particular way. Maybe it's because sometimes you need the story to challenge particular assumptions, right? But that it's pointed
Yeah.
enough, right? It's so in that way, it needs to be able to illustrate or illuminate,
Mm-hmm.
whatever we're talking about, or again, deepen the discussion in some kind, deepen the thinking in some kind of way, give the students something else to think about, or and again to even compare to their own experiences and what stories they may want to tell. But then that other part is, and in terms of pedagogy,
Mm-hmm.
is, yeah, again, like I said, we also need to break down our stories, because our stories can be misleading also. I mean, it's
Yeah.
part of what we've been talking about in my current C1001 class, and
Mm-hmm.
as we looked at a couple of weeks ago, the concept of manifest destiny.
Oh, I see. And can you give us a really brief and real quick? How can you describe that?
Well,
Quickly.
manifest destiny, the assertion by white U.S. citizens of
Mm-hmm.
the mid 19th century, the 1840s, that there was something inevitable to the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant conquest of the what is now called the American continent.
Mm-hmm.
And the quotation is it's something like it is clearly the manifest destiny of this nation to overreach the continent,
Mm-hmm.
something to that effect. And as one of my students, I thought very astutely uh, made the connection. Is that something like the white man's burden?
Mm-hmm.
I said, yeah, not exactly, but yes, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
it is using that same kind of language and this sort of what is it? Duty to civilize,
Mm-hmm.
or etc.
Yeah.
But looking at that essay though
Mm-hmm.
gave us a chance to look at, well, what are the justifying stories, right,
Mm-hmm.
of this historical place and time and this place we call the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And what about the counter story, right? What about Mexico's version of the story, for
So that's kind
example?
of like an example of the whole challenge. Like, someone may have something they believe or think, and, you just give them a real lived experience as opposed to trying to give hypotheticals or use logic to
Right.
produce a result. It's more so, well, this lived experience contradicts that, so maybe you should consider a different story, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or understand, that there are other versions of this story
Mm-hmm.
here, right?
And it may sound different depending
That
on where
may
you are.
sound, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So you may be familiar with the story of the brave Texans who are just want to be a free republic, and maybe
Mm-hmm.
you're unfamiliar with the unwillingness of them to convert to Catholicism, which they agreed to do if they were going to move into Mexican territory.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Hispanicize their names, which
Mm-hmm.
they agreed to do,
Mm-hmm.
and then didn't choose to. But the big one, right? The
Mm-hmm.
big one. I mean, those are things, but the big one agreed to give up their slaves,
Of course,
right?
yeah.
Because Mexico had already abolished
Yeah,
slavery.
and that's they ended up fighting over that one for a
And
little bit
that's
of
what
time.
they
So
ended up. That's
yeah,
so that
yeah,
part of the story is missing, isn't it? When we're
yeah,
told to remember the Alamo,
yeah.
right?
And I have one last question for you, and I appreciate all the stories you shared. I think this has been very enriching, for a lot of different reasons. And also thank you for your time. So for the last question, do you have any final words of wisdom for educators or learners, and sort of understanding maybe what to look out for as far as stories that might not be as useful or maybe
Mm,
divisive, or
mm-hmm.
for educators who maybe don't realize maybe they're participating in something dangerous?
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for ways that they can tell stories maybe in a healthy way or in a way that kind of
Mm-hmm.
mitigates some of the complications you brought up? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. It does. It certainly starts with an ability to be self-critical and self-aware,
Mm-hmm.
and take the time to craft your own stories in a way that you aren't marginalizing, invisibilizing, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that part, right? The importance of being self-aware, self-critical,
Mm-hmm.
and how should I say, not so attached to your own story, right?
Mm.
Um, that hard, and that's hard work, right?
Yeah.
So, but really important, particularly in the classroom
Mm-hmm.
or whatever the teaching situation may be, but to not be so attached to our own story.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's difficult for professors, and not just professors, teachers in general,
Yeah.
because we're smart people, and
And we
we
know our
think we
story is the right
know, and
one.
but
We
but
get paid to teach this
and all
story.
that, right? I know what I know, but I don't know everything, and
Yeah.
what I know I may not know, right?
Yeah.
So all that, right? So
Yeah.
just so be humble, right?
Mm-hmm.
Be humble in all of your accomplishments or whatever your degrees. Be humble
Mm-hmm.
because you don't know everything, and there are things to learn from the experiences of your students.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that part of it. And then the other part of it, and this can be very tricky,
Mm-hmm.
especially because stories can be traumatizing,
Mm-hmm.
they can be toxic, which again is why, that self-awareness, but then
Mm-hmm.
open, right?
Yeah.
So there's an open, we're open to the stories you have to tell.
Mm-hmm.
um, if you're willing and comfortable telling them, or what you're those of you who are going to share, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or your version of the world that you're going to share.
Yeah.
But recognize, right, that we may not all be in agreement. So how are we going to talk about these stories together, right?
Mm-hmm.
And on the one hand, I don't want to encourage the kind of liberal, well, we're just going to agree to disagree.
Mm-hmm.
Although I recognize at a certain point, yeah, I mean, we're just not going to ever come together, right? That does
Yeah.
happen. But can we, is it okay if we butt heads for a while,
Until we get somewhere.
somewhere? Or at
Yeah.
least I got something more to think about that,
Mm-hmm.
maybe. So that, right? So the openness to other folks' stories, but then the ability, well, the ability, but also the conscientiousness
Mm-hmm.
to create the space for that, in the classroom.
Yeah.
Um, so I've had some very right wing students in my
Mm-hmm.
classes, very left wing students in
Mm-hmm.
the classes, right, and sometimes in the same class. But okay, and we have this conversation, and as long as we can do that, we're fine. Everybody got something to think about. You've
Yeah.
made your argument. Was it informed by history,
Mm-hmm.
information?
Mm-hmm.
Here are some places you can go do a little bit more. So you think, for example, it came out recently in this same class.
Mm-hmm.
Um, well, isn't there a white genocide in South Africa? Didn't Nelson Mandela do the same thing?
Oh.
And I was like, well, okay.
Hmm.
So clearly you're misinformed, right?
Yeah.
You don't understand that, that the ANC is explicitly non-racial,
Correct.
right? They sign, there's a South Africa belongs to everyone who lives here, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're explicitly non-racial. So if you have been told,
Mm-hmm.
and specifically Nelson Mandela,
Mm-hmm.
right, then you have been misinformed, right?
Yeah.
And so you can do more research on that, right?
And I like how you're going through that because my whole thing is, don't attack people, attack ideas. That's the first thing, especially when we're going
Yes,
through stories like that, because you don't want. It's not about the people. People have beliefs because of maybe the stories they've interacted with.
exactly.
The other thing is, I like to talk about the difference between fact, belief, and opinion, so we can just stop everything. Like you just
Yes,
brought up something that was someone's belief, that was
exactly.
not a fact, that in their opinion was true. So I find that in my own pedagogy, including a lot of the things you brought up, that's really important to establish at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I even like to have students fact check themselves sometimes. I'm like, is that true? Are you sure? Look
Are
it
you
up.
sure?
We
Look it up.
standing here, we can look at this.
Which I love, right?
Yeah.
And having students, would you somebody please fact check that? Because I'm not sure. Would you please fact
Yeah,
check
and
that?
I think that's a part of the community too, because we can work
Yes.
together to verify or disprove certain
Yes.
things and aspects of our communities and the world.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, so thank you so much. I appreciate it. This was good. Thank you all for listening.
Thank
Peoples and
you.
Co. Peoples Exchange. We out, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. And before you drop off, make sure you stay tuned to learn more about Dr. Doucet and the organizations he belongs to.
So one of those organizations that
Mm-hmm.
was formed in grad school, the Ubwenge Artist Collective. Ubwenge meaning active intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
So the Ubwenge Arts Collective,
Mm-hmm.
continued for a while. As far as I'm concerned, it's still unofficially, right? We're
Mm-hmm.
at least the three of us, me with DJ and Lisa Marie.
Mm-hmm.
So for several years, in connection with another local artist,
Mm-hmm.
Mildred Rivera, also known as Madrid, um, based downtown and in a space, the LA, what was it, the City Market of LA Gallery, for
Mm-hmm.
years. When she would get the gallery, and her studio is down there also,
Mm-hmm.
but when she would get the gallery, she would say, hey, I got the gallery for 2 weeks, got the gallery for 3 weeks. Why don't you
Mm-hmm.
program some stuff? So I would program readings down there.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a member of the Joko
Okay,
Collective, and
good.
over the 10 years, right, we were doing things on the ground in the local community center, various kinds of workshops,
Mm-hmm.
teach-ins, conversations, right,
Yeah.
until the pandemic hit, where we moved online, and we have transitioned to Joko Conversations on YouTube. We have a
Okay,
YouTube
good, good.
channel, the Joko Collective
I didn't even
YouTube
know
channel.
that.
Yes,
Okay.
so the Joko Collective, Joko Conversations on YouTube,
Mm-hmm.
and you can also find us on Facebook, Tasha Thomas's page, or the Joko
Mm-hmm.
Collective page. It's part of Tasha Thomas. So I'm a member of Baji, right?
Mm-hmm.
So and with it dedicated to supporting Black immigrants and creating social justice for Black people, regardless of citizenship or not,
Mm-hmm.
however long one has been in this country, all that stuff, right?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Regis Peeples, co-founder of Peeples & Co. I'm a poet, philosopher, and educator. I have 10 plus years of experience within academia. I provide auditing services for different curriculum-based programs. I also do curriculum development. And lastly, I can do trainings. If you have a pre-existing curriculum, even if it needs a little bit of upkeep, I can help you with that. Or if you have a pre-existing program that maybe you want to enhance or bring into modern times, I can also do updates and upkeep on those sorts of things. My goal is to make sure that whatever the process is, it not only involves multicultural aspects and inclusivity, but is also backed by science and data so that we're using best practices that are proven in the classroom and outside of the classroom